Welcome to Sci-Fi Alien, where the unknown becomes a thrilling adventure. Today, we dive into an epic tale of humanity's most elite warriors, the Guardians, facing betrayal, loss, and a galaxy on the brink of war. What happens when Earth's leaders trade their greatest defenders for political gain? How far will the Guardians go to defend what remains of their honor? As the Valkyrie launch a brutal attack and the Council's treachery unfolds, the battle for humanity's soul begins. Can humanity rise from the ashes, or will it be consumed by the very forces that once promised to protect it? Stay tuned to find out. In the vast expanse of the galaxy, Earth had earned its place as a sanctuary, a beacon of hope for those in need. Compassion, the name of Earth's most prominent medical outpost, had become a symbol of that very hope, a testament to humanity's dedication to peace, healing, and unity. Positioned on the edge of known space, Compassion was no ordinary facility. It was a neutral ground, where species of every kind could seek solace, regardless of their past, their race, or the conflicts that might have torn their worlds apart. It was a place where healing was the only priority, and where Earth's finest doctors, researchers, and caregivers worked tirelessly, volunteering their time and expertise to mend broken bodies and hearts alike. But all of that changed in an instant, when a fleet of ships emerged from the black void of space, their sleek forms cutting through the stars like predators on the hunt. No warning. No message. Just the cold, calculated aggression of the Valkyrie, a species known throughout the galaxy for their ruthless territorialism and unwavering isolationist policies. To them, peace was weakness, and compassion was a flaw that could be exploited. They did not value life in the way Earth did. To them, the strong survived and the weak were discarded. And so, without hesitation, they struck. Compassion was the target. The Valkyrie's attack was swift and unrelenting, as if they had been planning it for far longer than anyone could have imagined. The first plasma torpedo struck the communications array with an earth-shattering explosion, severing the outpost's connection to Earth and the rest of the galaxy. In the blink of an eye, Compassion was cut off from the very network that had sustained it for years. No longer could they send or receive vital medical data, nor could they call for help. The Valkyrie had left them in isolation, completely vulnerable. Before the medical staff could comprehend what was happening, the second blast came. It hit the primary power core, plunging Compassion into darkness. Emergency lights flickered to life, but they could not mask the panic that quickly spread throughout the outpost. Gravity fluctuated, sending medical equipment and fragile patients tumbling across the rooms. The once orderly corridors of the station became a chaotic nightmare, as alarms blared in every corner of the facility. In the midst of this chaos, Dr. Alina Ray, the outpost's director, stood frozen in front of a viewport, her eyes fixed on the swirling storm clouds below. The planet she had once looked upon with awe now seemed like a distant memory. Compassion had always been a place of peace, a sanctuary where healing was the only mission. But now, the very foundation of that peace was crumbling. The lives of countless individuals were at risk, not just Earthlings, but people from every corner of the galaxy who had sought refuge in this sacred place. And then came the chilling realization, the Valkyrie weren't just attacking a medical outpost, they were targeting Earth's healers, the very essence of what made humanity different in this vast and often brutal universe. In that moment, Alina knew that this wasn't just an assault on a facility. It was an assault on everything humanity stood for: compassion, empathy, and a commitment to the greater good. These were not values the Valkyrie understood, but they were values that ran deep within every human soul. Alina's voice rang out through the intercom system, steady but urgent, as she initiated the emergency protocols. All personnel, This is Director Ray. We are under attack. Implement emergency evacuation procedures immediately. Medical staff, secure your patients. This is not a drill. Her words echoed through the halls of compassion as the staff scrambled to respond. Doctors, nurses, and technicians worked with frantic precision, securing the most vulnerable patients first. The young, the sick, the elderly, those whose conditions required constant care, were prioritized for evacuation. But no one was safe. The Valkyrie were ruthless in their assault, and the outpost security systems, crippled by the first strikes, could offer little protection. Meanwhile, in the pediatric ward, Dr. Maya Chen was finishing her rounds, checking on a young Vidian child whose skin glowed with a faint green light as it slept. The child had been diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder that required long-term treatment, and Maya had been monitoring its condition closely. But as the second explosion rocked the station, she knew it was only a matter of time before the child, along with the others, would be in danger. Her heart pounded in her chest as she quickly moved to the next patient, a cult-Orion adolescent who had been recovering from emergency surgery. The station's automated medical systems had kicked in, but the damage from the attack was undeniable. In the midst of the chaos, Maya could hear the faint chime of the station's AI, Iris, the facility's central medical assistant, announcing that Petraxin, the patient in Bay 4, was showing signs of improved neural activity. But Maya knew that would have to wait. She had more urgent matters to attend to. Prepare for evacuation, Maya ordered her team, trying to maintain her composure. We'll stabilize them as best we can in the pods. But even as she issued the order, she knew it would be a race against time. The Valkyrie weren't just trying to kill, they were trying to annihilate everything compassion stood for, everything Earth's medical outreach represented. This wasn't a war, it was a message. A message that Earth's values of healing and compassion had no place in a galaxy ruled by power and conquest. And then, as if to confirm the Valkyrie's intent, the communications officer relayed a message: the enemy ships are targeting the evacuation pods. Alina's heart sank. She had hoped for a safe escape, for a way to save those who still could be saved. But now, the Valkyrie had sealed their fate. The attack was deliberate, calculated. They knew exactly what they were doing. On the command deck of the lead Valkyrie ship, Commander Zertel watched with cold satisfaction as his forces continued to destroy compassion. He gave the order to target the evacuation pods. No survivors were to be left behind. This wasn't just a military strike, it was a statement. The Valkyrie were willing to sacrifice everyone to ensure that Earth's message of peace was crushed, once and for all. But what the Valkyrie failed to understand was that Earth's spirit could not be so easily extinguished. Compassion may have been shattered, but humanity's heart would not falter. In the chaos of the attack, the seeds of retribution were already being sown. The Valkyrie had struck at the wrong target. They had attacked Earth's healers, and that was a mistake they would soon come to regret. The stage was set, and the galaxy was about to witness something it had never seen before: the fury of humanity, unleashed. The silence that followed the Valkyrie's attack on compassion was deafening. It wasn't just the sudden loss of communication or the chaos of the destruction that had left humanity reeling, it was the overwhelming realization of what had been done. The attack wasn't random. It wasn't a simple military strike. It was something far more personal. They had targeted Earth's healers, the very people who embodied everything humanity stood for. The pain of that truth cut deeper than any physical wound. For years, Earth had built its reputation as a peaceful civilization, one that sought to heal, to help, and to mediate in the conflicts of the galaxy. The medical outposts Earth had set up across the stars weren't just about curing diseases, they were a message. A message that no matter the species, no matter the past, all life deserved compassion, care, and the chance to heal. It was a quiet, unspoken promise humanity had made to the universe: we will not conquer, we will not dominate, but we will extend a hand to those in need. We will heal you. But in the blink of an eye, all of that was shattered. Compassion, Earth's shining beacon of goodwill, lay in ruins. The lives of hundreds of innocent beings, some human, others from distant star systems, were lost in a matter of minutes. The Valkyrie had struck not just at a medical facility, but at the heart of Earth's soul. They had attacked the very foundation of what made humanity different. They had attacked compassion itself. In that moment, something stirred deep within the collective consciousness of Earth. The wound was not just physical, it was spiritual. Earth had always believed in the power of diplomacy, in the ability to find peace and understanding even in the darkest corners of space. But now, that belief was being tested like never before. For the first time, humanity was confronted with the brutal reality that there were those who would not be swayed by peace, who would not be moved by kindness or mercy. The Valkyrie had made that clear: they did not care about healing, about life, or about compassion. They cared only about power and dominance. And they had just shown humanity that peace alone would not protect them from such forces. But it wasn't just the attack itself that jolted humanity awake, it was the understanding of what this meant for the future. The Valkyrie had acted decisively and with cold precision, targeting a facility known for its neutrality and its humanitarian mission. If they could strike at compassion, then no one was safe. The outposts, the very places that stood as symbols of peace, could no longer be relied upon. The galaxy was not the utopia Earth had hoped it could be. The darkness that Earth had chosen to ignore, the violence and hostility festering in the corners of space, had come crashing down upon them. And for the first time in Earth's history, the people understood. Peace was not a guarantee. It was a choice. A choice that could be taken away in an instant. The attack on compassion wasn't just an assault on Earth's healers, it was a wake-up call to the entire human race. A brutal reminder that in a universe where power was often measured by strength and fear, humanity's kindness could be seen as weakness. The Valkyrie had understood this, and they had chosen to exploit it. They had hoped that by striking at the very heart of Earth's peaceful nature, they could silence humanity's voice in the galaxy once and for all. But in that moment of devastation, something else began to stir. It wasn't just the pain or the anger, it was a deeper, more primal feeling. Humanity's resilience. In the face of death and destruction, Earth's people refused to be cowed. They refused to let the Valkyrie's attack define them. This wasn't the end of Earth's story. This was only the beginning. The attack on compassion had ignited something far more powerful than any weapon or military force. It had ignited a fire within humanity's soul. A fire that demanded justice, retribution, and ultimately, survival. The leaders of Earth, once content to rely on diplomacy and humanitarian outreach, now found themselves facing an impossible choice. Would they continue down the path of peace, knowing that it had made them vulnerable? Or would they have to embrace a new reality, one where the peace they had once offered would no longer be enough to protect their people? The attack had forced them to confront a hard truth: in a universe filled with predators, sometimes even the most noble ideals could be crushed beneath the weight of brutality. As the news of the attack spread across Earth, the world went into a collective state of shock. But as the days passed, the shock began to turn to something else, something far more dangerous. Resolve. The people of Earth, the very ones who had been targeted, began to ask themselves, how could we let this happen? How can we stop this from happening again? The attack had revealed a painful truth that no one could ignore. Humanity had been naive, blind to the threats lurking in the galaxy, assuming that their goodwill would protect them. But now they knew better. The galaxy was not a place of peace, but of balance, where strength was often more important than kindness. And in that balance, humanity had been weak. The leaders of Earth gathered in secret, knowing that the time for debate was over. Action was required. The world's most powerful leaders, the generals, and the strategists began to formulate a plan, not just for retaliation, but for a fundamental shift in Earth's stance within the galaxy. No longer would Earth sit on the sidelines, offering peace while the universe watched with indifference. Humanity had to protect itself. It had to remind the galaxy that it would no longer be a passive player in the game of survival. This wasn't just about vengeance. This wasn't just about getting back at the Valkyrie for the blood they had spilled. This was about reclaiming Earth's place in the galaxy, about showing the universe that Earth would no longer be an easy target for those who sought to destroy them. The message was clear: you cannot attack our healers, our doctors, and expect us to remain silent. You attack us, and we will fight back. The wake-up call had been brutal. But humanity, in its darkest hour, had found its strength. The fire that had been ignited would not be easily extinguished. The Valkyrie had made a mistake. They had underestimated the power of humanity's resolve. They had attacked the wrong target, and now, they would face the consequences. The people of Earth would no longer be passive. They would rise, united in their mission to protect their values, their way of life, and most importantly, the legacy of compassion that had defined them for so long. The attack on compassion had done what no force in the galaxy could have done. It had awakened humanity, forcing them to see the world as it truly was. And in that awakening, Earth would find its true strength, not in its ability to heal, but in its will to survive. The attack on compassion had left humanity reeling, the weight of its loss settling heavy on the hearts of those who had trusted in peace. In the wake of the destruction, something shifted within the collective spirit of Earth. It was as if the galaxy itself had sent a message: if you want to survive, you must fight for it. And for the first time, Earth's leaders understood the truth they had long denied: peace, in a universe ruled by predators, could no longer be taken for granted. The time for diplomacy, for kindness, and healing, had not passed. But now, Earth needed to prepare to defend that peace in ways it had never imagined. Hidden deep beneath the surface of Mars, far from the eyes of the public, a dark truth lingered, a truth that humanity had long buried. The Guardians, the ultimate warriors created by Earth to safeguard its future, had not been deployed in over 15 years. They were Earth's deadliest special operations force, a unit so feared that its existence had been relegated to myth. When the galaxy thought of humanity, it thought of healers, diplomats, and traitors. But when humanity's darkest weapon was called upon, the galaxy would learn why it feared the Guardians. The Guardians were no ordinary soldiers. They were the culmination of Earth's finest military minds, combined with the most cutting-edge technological advancements. Their bodies had been enhanced, their senses heightened beyond human limits, making them not just fighters, but living weapons. They had been trained in the harshest conditions, enduring pain and sacrifice to become the finest operatives Earth had ever produced. Each Guardian was a master of tactics, combat, and strategy, equipped with skills that could turn the tide of any battle. But they were more than just tools of war, they were symbols of humanity's resolve. A reminder that if pushed too far, Earth would defend itself with ruthless precision. In the aftermath of the Valkyrie's assault, Commander Jeremiah Cain, leader of the Guardians, sat in the dark, his mind reeling. He had spent years preparing for a moment like this, yet nothing had prepared him for the scale of what had just transpired. The Valkyrie had attacked compassion, and they had attacked it with purpose. It wasn't a random strike, it was a message. Earth's healers had been their target, and with them, the very ideals humanity held most dear. The attackers hadn't just struck a medical facility, they had attacked Earth's soul. They had tried to destroy what humanity stood for. Cain's hands clenched into fists as he stared at the holographic interface in front of him. He had known the time would come when humanity would be forced to face its darkest fears. But even now, as the weight of the Valkyrie's assault pressed down on him, he had to acknowledge that this was different. The galaxy had seen Earth as weak, naive, and hopeful, unwilling to fight when it came to defending its values. But the attack on compassion had changed everything. The moment the Valkyrie struck, Earth's spirit had been tested, and humanity had chosen to survive. Now, Cain knew, it was time to awaken the Guardians. With a single command, he initiated Protocol Nemesis. The words he spoke were not just a command, they were a promise. The Guardians would rise. They would answer the call. And they would make the galaxy understand that if Earth's peace was threatened, humanity would fight back with a force more devastating than any enemy could imagine. In the depths of the Olympus Mons colony on Mars, where the Guardians had remained dormant for years, the pods began to stir. 12 stasis chambers, each one containing a member of the unit, hummed to life, the cold cryogenic system slowly shutting down as the warriors within them came to life. The first to awaken was Colonel Jeremiah Cain. His enhanced senses snapped to attention as his body readjusted to the new environment. The neural interfaces embedded in his body activated, feeding him data faster than any unenhanced human could process. His eyes, once dull from years of stasis, now gleamed with purpose. The time for rest was over. The galaxy had attacked Earth's healers. Now, the Guardians would respond. Cain stood, the muscle enhancements in his legs propelling him forward with fluid grace. Around him, the other members of the Guardians began to awaken. Major Lydia Reynolds, the unit's infiltration specialist, stretched her limbs as the enhancements in her body adjusted to the new environment. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, the cybernetic systems expert, immediately began syncing his neural implants to the Guardian's mission parameters. They were all ready. Each Guardian was an expert in their field, enhanced and trained for a singular purpose, to protect Earth and its people at all costs. And now, they would do more than that. They would remind the galaxy of humanity's strength. The mission parameters flashed across Cain's vision, and he nodded grimly. The Valkyrie had made the mistake of underestimating humanity's will to survive. The Guardians would show them what happens when they attack Earth's healers. They would hunt down every Valkyrie involved in the assault and ensure that the message was clear: no one would threaten humanity without facing the consequences. The Guardians had spent their lives training for moments like this, and now it was time to unleash everything they had learned, everything they had become. The mission was set into motion as Cain and his team boarded their specialized stealth vessels. These ships were equipped with the latest cloaking technology, rendering them invisible to enemy sensors. As they flew into the heart of Valkyrie territory, their presence was unknown, their movements undetectable. The Guardians were silent, deadly, and precise. They would find the Valkyrie, and they would dismantle them piece by piece. Each Guardian operated independently, with a single goal: eliminate the enemy. Their mission wasn't just about killing, it was about sending a message. They would strike without warning, without mercy, and without hesitation. They had been awakened to fight, and they would not stop until the Valkyrie had been brought to justice for what they had done. As the Guardians infiltrated the Valkyrie outposts, their attacks were swift and lethal. The Valkyrie were caught off guard by the precision of the strike. They thought themselves the hunters, but now they were the prey. The Guardians moved with the fluidity of shadows, their every action a testament to the power humanity had at its disposal. Admiral Victor Renner, the leader of the rogue faction within Earth's military, thought he could control the galaxy with political power and brute force. But he had never encountered anything like the Guardians. They were humanity's greatest weapon, and they were unleashed. The awakening of the Guardians was more than just a military response. It was a declaration. A declaration that humanity would never again be passive in the face of violence. That if anyone dared to attack Earth's healers, they would be met with the fury of a force that had been hidden away for far too long. The Guardians were not just soldiers, they were the embodiment of Earth's determination to survive, to protect, and to fight for what was right. As the battle raged on, the Valkyrie learned the hard way: you can attack Earth's healers, but you cannot defeat humanity's spirit. The Guardians had risen, and the galaxy would never forget the day they were awakened. The news came to Commander Jeremiah Cain like a dagger to the heart, shocking, sudden, and impossible to ignore. He had already initiated Protocol Nemesis, waking the Guardians from their long slumber, ready to avenge the attack on Compassion and bring the Valkyrie to justice. The mission was clear: a swift retribution for the devastation they had caused. But nothing could have prepared him for what came next. A message, encrypted, and delivered in a way that bypassed even the Guardian's most secure channels, flickered onto his display. The message wasn't from the Valkyrie, nor from any known enemy. It was from Earth. The text was simple, yet it struck Cain like a thunderclap: the Council has authorized the end. Trust no one, not even your own. The words echoed in his mind, chilling him to the core. The Council, the very body that had commanded and protected the Guardians for years, had just condemned them. At first, Cain couldn't comprehend it. Was this some sort of mistake? A misunderstanding? But no, the words were too deliberate, too specific to be anything but truth. The Council, the very people the Guardians had sworn to protect, had betrayed them. He ran his hands over his face, trying to process what he was reading. How could this be? The Guardians had served Earth without question, their loyalty to the greater cause unquestionable. They had stood ready to defend humanity from any threat, no matter how dire. And now, Earth itself had turned its back on them. The very people they had risked their lives for were the ones who had issued the order to shut them down. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was existential. The Guardians were humanity's greatest defense, and yet the very government they had sworn to protect had decided they were too dangerous to remain active. The message was clear: the Guardians were being sacrificed in the name of political expediency. Earth's leadership had struck a deal with the Valkyrie. They were willing to offer the Guardians as collateral, to abandon their most powerful weapon in exchange for peace, for a chance at securing the fragile alliances that would ensure humanity's survival in the galaxy. The anger Cain felt was immediate and all-consuming. He had led his team through countless missions, each more dangerous than the last. They had operated in the shadows, done what was necessary to protect Earth and its values. And yet, now, they were nothing more than pawns in a larger political game. The very ideals they had fought for had been sold out by the very people who were supposed to protect them. Cain's heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of betrayal, fury, and disbelief that he could barely contain. What was even more infuriating was the timing. humanity had been under attack. Compassion, Earth's symbol of goodwill, had just been destroyed. Lives were lost, people from every species, all of them relying on humanity's promise of compassion. Earth's healers, the very people who represented the best of humanity, had been targeted, and in their darkest hour, the Council chose to abandon them. The betrayal wasn't just political, it was personal. They had attacked what made Earth human, its compassion, its empathy, its dedication to healing and helping those in need. Now, the Council wanted to sacrifice the Guardians to appease the Valkyrie, to protect their own position of power at the cost of everything the Guardians stood for. The words in the message haunted Cain as he turned his thoughts to his team. The Guardians, the people he had led, trained, and fought alongside, had no idea of the treachery that was unfolding. His mind raced as he considered the implications of the message. What did this mean for them? For the mission? For humanity itself? The betrayal ran so deep that even the Guardians themselves were caught in the crossfire. Cain knew he had to act, but every option felt like a betrayal in itself. He couldn't go back. He couldn't just turn away from the mission, from the retribution the Valkyrie so richly deserved. The pain of knowing that their own leaders had condemned them was sharp and personal, but it could not cloud his judgment. If the Guardians pulled back now, the Valkyrie would regroup, rebuild, and continue to spread their violence across the galaxy. Compassion was destroyed, but there were other outposts, other innocent lives at risk. Humanity could not afford to show weakness now. But there was a deeper, more troubling question that Cain couldn't shake. Who in the Council had authorized this? Who had made the decision to betray the Guardians, to sacrifice everything they had worked for in the name of peace with the Valkyrie? Cain's suspicions grew darker by the second. He had always known that the political landscape of Earth was fragile, that there were factions within the government who would do whatever it took to preserve their own power. But this was something else entirely. This was not just political maneuvering. This was a calculated betrayal of humanity's very soul. The Guardians had been the ultimate safeguard against threats like the Valkyrie, and now the very people they had sworn to protect had cast them aside. His thoughts were interrupted by the harsh, mechanical voice of his communications officer, alerting him that the rogue message had been traced. The Valkyrie had intercepted communication between Earth's military factions and had been aware of the Council's dealings. They were prepared for this. They had anticipated that humanity's internal divisions would give them the upper hand. Cain slammed his fist against the console, anger flaring inside him. The Guardians were being caught in a trap, caught between the ruthless enemies on the outside and the treacherous forces within. Humanity's greatest strength had been its ability to unite in the face of adversity, but now they were divided from within, their very leadership undermining the foundation they had fought so hard to build. He turned to his team, his voice low but filled with the cold, determined anger that only came from betrayal. "The mission hasn't changed," he said, his words cutting through the air like a blade. "We will finish what we started. The Valkyrie will be held accountable. But we must do this carefully. We are no longer just fighting the Valkyrie. We are fighting for humanity's very soul." The weight of what was at stake settled heavily on Cain's shoulders. He had spent years preparing for moments like this, but never had he imagined that the true battle would be fought not on the battlefield, but within the very heart of Earth itself. Betrayal had come from the ones they had sworn to protect. And now, Cain and the Guardians would face the most difficult challenge yet, not just defeating the enemy, but reconciling their loyalty to humanity with the brutal reality of betrayal. And in the end, they would learn whether humanity's ideals could survive when the very people entrusted with them had turned their backs. The weight of the betrayal settled heavily on Commander Jeremiah Cain. The message from Earth's Council had cut through him like a blade, leaving a wound that could not easily be healed. It was not just the shock of their abandonment that stung, it was the realization that humanity's leadership had willingly chosen political safety over the protection of its most powerful defense. The Guardians, humanity's last line of defense, had been thrown aside. Earth had decided to make a deal with the Valkyrie, sacrificing its own protectors to secure a fragile peace. And in that moment, Cain knew that his mission, their mission, had changed irrevocably. The mission had always been simple: strike back at the Valkyrie, deliver swift and unrelenting justice for the destruction of compassion. But now, with the shocking betrayal of the Council, Cain faced an impossible choice. He could not stop now. The Guardians could not return to Earth in defeat. The Valkyrie had attacked, and their aggression had to be answered. But the clock was ticking, and Cain knew that every moment spent hesitating, every second wasted pondering the impossible decision before him, was a second the Valkyrie could use to consolidate their power, regroup, and strike again. His fingers drummed against the surface of the command console as he ran through the impossible choices in his mind. The betrayal had come at the worst possible time, just as the Guardians were poised to finish their mission. The Valkyrie had been crippled, but their will to fight was not yet broken. If they were given the time to regroup, to repair their forces, then all of humanity's efforts would have been in vain. The mission was clear, but now it was no longer just about retaliation. It was a race against time, and every decision carried the weight of humanity's future. Cain's mind raced, his thoughts moving faster than any normal human could comprehend. The Guardians had been activated, the battle had begun, and yet now he was faced with a painful truth. The Council's betrayal wasn't just an obstacle, it was a new, even more dangerous enemy. It wasn't enough to defeat the Valkyrie now. Cain had to outpace the Council's treachery, ensure the Guardians' mission succeeded while preventing further damage to Earth's fragile position in the galaxy. Cain's voice rang out with cold determination as he addressed his team. "We're not turning back. The Valkyrie think they can break us, they're wrong. But we're on a clock. The longer we delay, the more time the Council has to implement their plans. We have one chance to end this before everything we've fought for is compromised. The mission has changed, but our purpose has not. We finish what we started." His words were met with silent nods from his team. The Guardians, each one enhanced to the limits of human potential, were not used to hesitation. They had been trained to act decisively, to strike when the opportunity arose. But this was different. This wasn't just about eliminating an enemy, it was about surviving, about ensuring that the mission they had dedicated their lives to didn't die along with them. As the Guardians moved toward their next target, Cain felt the weight of time pressing down on them. The Valkyrie were relentless, and their command structure was beginning to recover. Cain's tactical mind worked in overdrive, calculating the best approach to ensure that the Valkyrie would not be given the chance to strike back. He knew that any hesitation would be fatal. They had to hit hard and fast, before the Valkyrie could regroup and strike at Earth again. The stakes were higher now. The Valkyrie were not just a threat, they were now a ticking clock, and Cain had to race against it. But the time pressure was not the only thing weighing on him. There was also the constant threat of the Council's influence. Cain's mind kept returning to the message he had received: "Trust no one, not even your own." The haunting words kept repeating in his mind like a drum beat, pushing him forward. But the question remained: who could Cain trust now? Who within Earth's leadership was still loyal? Who had orchestrated this betrayal, and what did they stand to gain? his thoughts were interrupted by a flashing alert on his console. The first phase of the mission was complete. The Guardians had successfully neutralized a Valkyrie outpost, severing one of their key supply lines. It was a victory, but only a small one. There was no time to celebrate. Cain knew the Valkyrie would retaliate. Their pride had been wounded, and their leaders would not rest until they had regained their strength. The Guardians had struck, but the war was far from over. Cain ordered the team to move forward. They would continue their mission, hitting the Valkyrie where they least expected it. But the clock was still ticking, and each moment brought them closer to a dangerous threshold. The Council's betrayal was a threat, but it was not the only one they had to contend with. The Valkyrie had made their move, and now the Guardians had to outpace them. As Cain and his team infiltrated the heart of the Valkyrie's remaining strongholds, the stakes grew higher. The clock seemed to tick louder in his ears, the urgency of their mission settling in with each passing moment. There was no room for mistakes. Every step they took had to be calculated with precision. The mission to defeat the Valkyrie had to be completed, but they had to do it while staying one step ahead of both the enemy and the Council's political maneuvering. Cain knew this was a race against time, but it was more than that. It was a fight for the soul of humanity. If the Guardians failed, the Valkyrie would be allowed to regroup, and Earth's future would be uncertain. If they succeeded, it would be a victory not just over the Valkyrie, but over the forces within their own government that sought to undermine them. As the final strikes landed and the Valkyrie strongholds began to crumble, Cain felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The mission was near its end, but the victory was far from simple. They had done what no one else could. They had faced betrayal, adversity, and time itself, and they had fought through it all. But Cain knew the cost of their success would not be without consequences. The Guardians had proven that humanity could fight back, that it could overcome even the darkest betrayals. But the galaxy would soon learn that humanity's fight for survival was not over. The race against time had only just begun. In the midst of their mission, as the Guardians relentlessly pursued their targets and dismantled Valkyrie forces with precision, a deeper and more troubling realization began to dawn on Commander Jeremiah Cain. The attack on compassion and the subsequent betrayal by Earth's own leadership had shaken him to his core, but it was the gradual uncovering of the truth about the Council's dealings that would push Cain and his team to the edge of disbelief. The betrayal was not an isolated decision, it was a carefully orchestrated move, part of a larger plan that had been in motion far longer than anyone had imagined. Cain had always been a soldier of principle. He had served Earth and its people with unwavering loyalty, trusting that the leaders of his home planet would never ask him to sacrifice the very ideals they stood for. But as the walls of secrecy began to crack, Cain realized the truth was darker and more insidious than he could have ever anticipated. The Council's actions were not just the result of cowardice or expedience. They were part of a calculated, deliberate effort to ensure their own survival in a galaxy that was becoming increasingly hostile. And that survival, Cain discovered, came at a horrifying cost. It started with the fragments of intercepted communications. At first, they were small, seemingly insignificant pieces, rhetoric exchanged in the quiet halls of the Council, diplomatic jargon that Cain had been trained to dismiss. But as he dug deeper, the threads began to weave a more disturbing picture. The Council, the same body that had championed Earth's efforts to maintain peace, had been engaging in secret negotiations with the Valkyrie, the very race that had attacked compassion. At first, it seemed unbelievable. How could Earth's leaders, who had been so vocal in their support of peace, be engaging with the Valkyrie, a species known for its brutality and isolationism? The answer came not as a single revelation but as a series of quiet, insidious admissions that slowly unraveled everything Cain thought he knew about Earth's political landscape. The truth was simple yet devastating. The Council had struck a deal with the Valkyrie, one that would secure their own political survival at the expense of Earth's most valuable defenders. The Valkyrie, in their quest for dominance, had offered the Council a proposal, a strategic alliance that would ensure Earth's position in the galaxy, but at a steep price. The Council had agreed to sacrifice the Guardians, the one force capable of protecting humanity from external threats, in exchange for a fragile peace with the Valkyrie. Earth's most elite force, the Guardians, had been written off, deemed too dangerous to remain active, a threat to the Council's political maneuvering. To Earth's leaders, the Guardians were expendable, an inconvenient reminder of humanity's latent power. The more Cain uncovered, the more the betrayal stung. The Valkyrie had seen Earth's vulnerability and had exploited it with ruthless precision. They had calculated that by targeting compassion, the symbol of Earth's humanitarian efforts, they could not only crush humanity's goodwill but also drive a wedge between Earth's leaders and the very people who were supposed to protect their values. The Council, in their desperation, had agreed to silence the Guardians, to neutralize Earth's greatest weapon in exchange for the temporary survival of their own political careers. The Guardians were collateral damage, a necessary sacrifice for the Council to remain in power. The truth was that human lives, ideals, and the future of humanity had been bartered for short-term political gain. Cain's heart ached as he processed this grim reality. The decision to abandon the Guardians wasn't just about the immediate threat posed by the Valkyrie, it was a calculated decision that spanned years of political maneuvering. The Council had long known that the Guardians' power and influence could threaten their hold on the galaxy. They had quietly brokered deals with other powers, including the Valkyrie, hoping to secure an alliance that would stabilize their position. Earth's strength, the very thing that had made it stand out in the galaxy, was now a liability. The Guardians were too dangerous, too unpredictable. Their very existence was a reminder that humanity could fight back, that humanity's ideals were worth protecting, and the Council didn't want to face the consequences of that strength. The betrayal ran deeper still. The Valkyrie's role in this was not as a mere aggressor, they had been complicit in the scheme. In exchange for their alliance with Earth's leadership, they had promised to keep the Guardians in check. They had known that the Guardians' wrath would be swift and devastating, so they had agreed to directly target compassion as a means of breaking humanity's will to fight. The Valkyrie understood that by destroying the symbol of Earth's peace efforts, they could drive a wedge between Earth's leaders and its protectors, weakening humanity's resolve and leaving it open to further manipulation. Cain couldn't help but feel betrayed not just by the Council but by the very ideals he had sworn to protect. The Guardians had been humanity's shield, standing at the ready to defend Earth from any threat, no matter how great. But now, they were being thrown to the wolves. Their lives and their mission had been deemed irrelevant in the face of the Council's hunger for power. And worse still, the Council had knowingly handed them over to the Valkyrie. The more Cain uncovered, the more the sting of betrayal burned. This was not just a matter of political expedience, it was a betrayal of everything humanity had worked for. The Council's dealings were a dark revelation, but they were also a reminder that humanity's fight was far from over. The Guardians could not just accept this fate. They had been betrayed, but they would not be silenced. They had always fought for something larger than themselves, they had fought for Earth's survival. And now, Cain knew that the fight had to continue. He had to finish what had been started, even if it meant confronting the very people who had once been his allies. The truth about the Council's dealings had shattered the trust he once had in his leaders, but it also solidified his resolve. The Guardians would no longer be pawns in a political game. They would be the force that would remind the galaxy of the power and strength that humanity had at its disposal. As Cain turned away from the console, his mind filled with the faces of his team, of the Guardians who had trusted him. The weight of betrayal was immense, but the fire of determination burned brighter. The truth had been exposed, and now it was up to the Guardians to make sure that it was not their idealism, their compassion, that was lost in the galaxy's shadow. The Valkyrie may have thought they had broken humanity's spirit, but Cain knew better. The Guardians would rise, and they would finish what they had started, no matter the cost. As the fire of betrayal burned within Commander Jeremiah Cain, so too did the fierce determination to fulfill their mission. The truth about the Council's treachery had cracked the foundation of their once unwavering loyalty to Earth's leadership, yet it also ignited something much deeper within Cain and his team. The Guardians had always fought for something bigger than themselves. They fought for Earth, for the ideals of peace and compassion humanity had championed. But now, those ideals were under siege, not just from external forces like the Valkyrie, but from within their own ranks, from those who had turned their backs on the very principles that made Earth great. Cain stood on the precipice of a choice that could change the galaxy forever. His team had been betrayed, their purpose reduced to political bargaining chips. But the Valkyrie had underestimated the Guardians. They had seen humanity's peacekeepers as pawns, weak, predictable, and easily manipulated. But what they failed to grasp was that the Guardians weren't just soldiers. They were the embodiment of humanity's resolve, its unyielding will to survive and protect what was good in the universe. And now, the time had come for the Guardians to remind the galaxy just how far humanity was willing to go when it was pushed to the brink. The mission was simple, or at least it had been. The Guardians had been activated to seek retribution for the Valkyrie's attack on compassion, to punish them for the lives lost and the innocent lives they had sacrificed in a bid to crush Earth's humanitarian efforts. But the betrayal from the Council had shifted everything. This was no longer just about retaliation. This was about survival, about ensuring that humanity would never again be betrayed by its own leaders, and about making sure that the cost of that betrayal was too high for anyone to dare repeat. The Valkyrie were scattered across their strongholds, their forces still dangerous, but faltering. The Guardians, with their enhanced abilities and years of training, moved with silent precision through the chaos of battle. They were ghosts, invisible to their enemies, surgical in their strikes. There was no room for hesitation, no time to second-guess their mission. Every move, every action had to be flawless. The fate of humanity was tied to this moment. As Cain and his team infiltrated the heart of the Valkyrie's remaining strongholds, the weight of their mission hung heavily in the air. The Council's betrayal was still a fresh wound, and yet Cain knew that he couldn't afford to dwell on it. This wasn't about him, or about the betrayal they had suffered, it was about humanity's future. The Guardians had to be the ones to finish this, to send a clear message that no one, not even their own leaders, could ever doubt humanity's strength again. The strikes came fast, relentless, and precise. Major Lydia Reynolds, the infiltration specialist, moved like a shadow through the Valkyrie's defenses. Her expertise in stealth made her an invaluable asset to the team. She disabled the enemy's surveillance systems, cutting off their ability to coordinate defenses. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, the cybernetic systems expert, hacked into the Valkyrie's network, sowing confusion and disarray within their ranks. Meanwhile, Colonel Cain led the charge, his enhanced strength and speed tearing through the Valkyrie forces with deadly efficiency. They were all driven by the same purpose, the same burning desire for retribution and survival. But as the Guardians advanced deeper into the heart of the Valkyrie's empire, they began to realize that this battle was about far more than just military superiority. This was about the soul of humanity, about whether Earth would continue to stand as a beacon of hope or be buried under the weight of its own hubris and betrayal. Every strike they made was a reminder to the galaxy that humanity, when pushed too far, was capable of unimaginable fury. The final confrontation came on the outskirts of the Valkyrie's command center, where their leaders had taken refuge. Commander Zertul, the leader of the Valkyrie forces, stood ready, his gaze cold and calculating. He had underestimated the Guardians, just as the Council had underestimated humanity's will to fight. Now, facing Cain and his team, Zertul realized that his forces were no match for the fury that humanity had unleashed. Cain's voice rang out across the battlefield, steady and unwavering. Your attack on compassion was not just an assault on Earth, it was an assault on everything humanity stands for. You thought you could break us, thought you could crush our spirit. But you were wrong. We are humanity. And you will face the consequences for what you've done. The battle that followed was brutal, a violent clash of wills and ideologies. The Valkyrie fought fiercely, but the Guardians were relentless. Every move they made was calculated for maximum impact, every strike a reminder that humanity would not bend to the will of conquerors. It was clear now that this battle was not just about vengeance, it was about showing the galaxy what happens when you underestimate Earth's resolve. The Valkyrie had thought they could destroy humanity's peacekeepers, but they had awakened a force that would not stop until the final blow was struck. When Cain finally faced Commander Zertul, the weight of their conflict came to a head. Zertul was fierce, his strength unmatched among the Valkyrie, but even he could not withstand the might of a guardian on a mission of survival. Cain's enhanced strength collided with Zertul's in a clash that shook the very foundation of the command center. The two fought with everything they had, each blow fueled by years of loyalty, betrayal, and the desperate need to protect the future of humanity. The fight felt endless, a battle not just of physical might but of ideals. Zertul, representing the cold, calculating aggression of the Valkyrie, struck with every intention to crush Cain's spirit. But Cain fought not just for himself or even for his team, he fought for humanity's future. And with each blow, the weight of that responsibility bore down on him. He could feel the lives lost at compassion, the ideals sacrificed by the Council, all pushing him forward. Finally, it ended with a final, decisive blow, a crushing strike that sent Zertul to his knees. Cain stood over him, breathing heavily, eyes burning with the fire of resolve. This ends now, he said, his voice low and filled with finality. The Valkyrie leader, broken and defeated, could only stare up at him, unable to comprehend the depth of humanity's will to survive. As the dust settled and the battle came to an end, Cain looked around at his team. The Guardians had triumphed, but the victory was not without its cost. Lives had been lost, sacrifices had been made, and humanity's soul had been tested. But in the end, they had succeeded. They had shown the galaxy what happened when you attacked Earth's healers, when you tried to crush humanity's spirit. You would face the full force of a warrior race awakened, a force that would stop at nothing to protect what mattered most. Cain stood tall, his team at his side, knowing that they had done more than simply defeat an enemy. They had reminded the galaxy that humanity was not weak, not passive, and certainly not broken. The Guardians had made their stand, and Earth's strength had been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. This was humanity's final stand, and it was a victory that would echo through the stars for years to come. The battlefield was silent for a moment, the echoes of violence fading into the starkness of what had just transpired. The Valkyrie were retreating, their forces broken, their spirit crushed. Yet amidst the wreckage and the triumph, Commander Jeremiah Cain found himself standing on the precipice of a final, personal battle, one that would define not only his mission but the very future of humanity. This fight wasn't against the Valkyrie, nor was it about the military strategies that had brought them victory. This fight was against a betrayal far deeper, one that came from the very heart of Earth itself. The Council's betrayal had not only jeopardized the mission and the Guardians but had also laid bare the depths of human ambition and selfishness. And now, standing before him, was Admiral Victor Renner, the leader of the rogue faction within Earth's military, the man responsible for orchestrating the betrayal that had cost the Guardians their place in the galaxy's future. Renner had once been a hero, a symbol of Earth's military prowess, someone Cain had respected. But now, Renner was nothing more than a pawn in a game of political survival, a man whose thirst for power had clouded his vision and led him down a path of moral compromise. Cain's gaze met Renner's across the wreckage of the battlefield, the two men standing in stark contrast. Renner was a towering figure, his physical presence as commanding as his reputation had once been. But his eyes, cold and calculating, betrayed a man who had lost his way. Cain, on the other hand, stood smaller in stature but infinitely stronger in spirit. His eyes burned with a fire not of hatred but of something deeper, a commitment to the ideals he had sworn to protect, ideals that Renner had long since abandoned. The air between them crackled with tension, not just the anticipation of a final fight, but the collision of two deeply opposing philosophies. For Cain, this was not just a personal vendetta against Renner, it was a reckoning. It was a reckoning with everything Renner had come to represent. Cain had been raised to believe in the honor of service, in the nobility of protecting those who could not protect themselves, and in the sacred duty to uphold the values of humanity, no matter the cost. But Renner? Renner had fallen prey to the temptations of power, choosing personal gain and political survival over everything that had once made Earth strong. As Cain stepped forward, the weight of the situation bore down on him. Every step, every breath was filled with the gravity of what had happened. Renner had sold out the Guardians for power. He had sold out humanity's highest ideals in exchange for political leverage. And now, Cain had to confront that betrayal face to face. His heart pounded, not with rage, but with a deep, sorrowful resolve. This wasn't a fight for survival or revenge, it was a fight to reclaim the soul of humanity. Renner's voice broke the silence, low and mocking. "You've done well, Cain. But you're wasting your time. The Council has already made their decision. You, the Guardians, the ideals you cling to, none of it matters anymore. The galaxy doesn't care about your values. It cares about power. And you were a tool of that power, just like the rest of us. Don't you see? The only way to ensure Earth's survival in this galaxy is to wield that power. Not to hope for peace, but to seize it by force." Cain's fists clenched, but his voice remained steady, though thick with the weight of his conviction. "You've forgotten what made Earth great, Renner. It wasn't our power, our military might, or our ability to crush those who oppose us. It was our ideals, the belief that we could make a difference, that we could create a better galaxy through compassion, not fear. You've abandoned that. And now you want to claim it was for the greater good? No. You've sold out, and you've lost everything that made you who you were." Renner's face twisted in frustration, his jaw tightening as the words struck home. He was a man of pragmatic ideals, someone who saw the world as it was and bent it to his will. To him, the end always justified the means. But Cain's words, like a spear through his defenses, reminded him of what he had once believed, what he had lost. His eyes flickered with uncertainty for just a moment before he regained his composure. "You're naive, Cain," Renner spat. "Idealism doesn't survive in this galaxy." The Valkyrie understood that. The galaxy is ruled by the strong. And when you're weak, when you allow yourself to be controlled by your moral compass, you get destroyed. That's what happened to compassion. And now it's happening to you. Cain shook his head, a quiet sadness settling over him. "You think the galaxy is about strength and dominance, Renner. But you've forgotten the most important thing, the one thing that makes us human. It's not about the strength to destroy. It's about the strength to protect. That's the difference between us. And that's why you lost. Because in your quest for power, you destroyed what mattered most." The two men stood facing each other, each representing a different vision for the future of humanity, one built on power and control, the other on hope and redemption. And then, without another word, the battle began. The fight between Cain and Renner was not just a clash of fists, it was the clash of ideals, of beliefs, of everything each man had stood for. Cain fought with everything he had, his enhanced strength, his sharpened senses, the raw emotion of years of loyalty and betrayal coursing through him. Every strike was infused with the weight of his ideals, of the lives lost at compassion, of the broken promise made by Earth's leadership. Renner fought just as fiercely, but his strikes were driven by a cold, calculated need to win at all costs. He didn't fight for honor or survival, he fought for control, for the belief that the only way forward was through domination. His strikes were sharp, relentless, but lacked the depth of conviction that Cain carried with him. For Renner, this battle was one more step toward securing the future he had envisioned, a future where power ruled and ideals were nothing more than a commodity to be bought and sold. Cain's fists collided with Renner's in a flurry of fury and frustration. Each blow that landed was a reminder of everything Renner had forsaken, of the humanity he had abandoned in pursuit of power. And as the fight wore on, Cain realized that this battle wasn't just about defeating Renner, it was about reclaiming what had been lost. Reclaiming the humanity that still burned brightly within him and his team. In the end, it was Cain's conviction that won the fight. He stood over Renner, panting heavily, but resolute. "You may have thought you were protecting Earth," Cain said, his voice soft but unwavering. "But in the end, you're just another conqueror. And humanity doesn't need conquerors." Renner lay there, defeated, his breath ragged, his body broken. He had failed to see the truth, and now, with the weight of his actions crashing down upon him, he understood the cost of his choices. But for Cain, the victory wasn't just about defeating Renner, it was about reminding the galaxy that Earth's greatest strength wasn't in its power to dominate, but in its ability to protect, to defend, and to rise above the darkness of its own mistakes. Cain stood tall, looking out over the battlefield, knowing that the real fight for humanity's soul had only just begun. The Guardians had proven that humanity's ideals were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And as the dust settled, the message was clear: humanity would not fall. It would stand, strong and unbroken, ready to face whatever came next. The dust of battle settled slowly, the echoes of violence fading into an eerie silence. The battlefield, once teeming with the chaos of conflict, now lay still. The Valkyrie forces had been routed, their command shattered, their strength broken. Earth's warriors, the Guardians, had fought fiercely, with every ounce of their enhanced strength, skill, and determination, but it wasn't just their superior combat abilities that had brought them victory. It was their resolve, their unwavering belief in humanity's ideals that had driven them to triumph. And in that moment, As Commander Jeremiah Cain stood amidst the carnage, he realized that their victory had not just been a military conquest, it had been the reclamation of something far more precious, humanity's soul. But as the Guardians regrouped, the weight of their victory felt bittersweet. The battle had been won, the Valkyrie had been defeated, but the scars of betrayal were still fresh. Earth's leaders, the very ones who had set this whole chain of events in motion, had abandoned the Guardians. The Council had made their choice, and humanity had paid the price. Yet, as Cain surveyed the wreckage, he knew that this victory would not be remembered simply for the destruction of the Valkyrie. It would be remembered for the message it sent across the galaxy: humanity was not weak, and it would not be cowed by anyone, not even its own leaders. Cain stood tall, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His team, the Guardians, gathered around him, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. The battle had been brutal, and many had fallen, but they had held true to their mission. They had delivered justice to the Valkyrie, but they had also sent a message, one that would resonate through the stars for generations to come. "We've done it," Major Lydia Reynolds said softly, her voice tired but resolute. "But we can't forget why we did it. It wasn't just about avenging compassion. It was about showing the galaxy what happens when you push humanity too far." Cain nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about reminding the galaxy of what Earth stands for. Compassion, strength, and justice. We don't fight for conquest. We fight to protect those who can't protect themselves. And we'll keep fighting, no matter the cost. As the Guardians prepared to leave the battlefield, Cain knew that their mission was far from over. The Valkyrie had been defeated, but the galaxy had learned a harsh lesson: humanity's strength lay not just in its military might, but in its unbreakable spirit. The Guardians had proved that, and now the galaxy would know that Earth's peacekeepers were not just soldiers. They were symbols of humanity's unshakable resolve. But even as they made their way back to their vessels, Cain couldn't shake the feeling that the true test of humanity's strength had yet to come. The Council's betrayal had left a dark mark on Earth's leadership, and he knew that the future would not be easy. Humanity had proven that it could defend itself, that it could rise above the challenges thrown at it, but would it be enough to overcome the forces that sought to tear it apart from within? As the Guardians made their way toward Earth, Cain knew that the next step in their journey would be just as critical as the one they had just completed. They had to rebuild, to restore faith in the ideals that had been betrayed by the Council. They had to remind the people of Earth what they stood for and what they had fought for. This victory, though hard won, was only the beginning of something larger, something far more important: the restoration of humanity's honor. Once back on Earth, the message that Cain and his team would deliver would not just be one of victory, it would be one of renewal. The galaxy had seen the strength of the Guardians, but now they would see the true power of humanity, the power of unity, of standing together even in the face of betrayal. It was not enough to simply defeat the Valkyrie, it was about defeating the darkness within, about showing the galaxy that Earth's strength wasn't just physical but moral, rooted in its ideals. The Council's betrayal had shaken humanity to its core, but it had also galvanized its spirit. The people of Earth had seen what had happened when they were led astray, and now, it was time for change. Cain knew that the Guardians would not just fight for the defense of Earth, they would fight for the restoration of the principles that made it great. They would fight for the future of humanity, and they would ensure that Earth's light would never be dimmed by the forces of corruption or greed. As the message spread across the galaxy, it was clear that humanity had taken its place among the stars not through fear, but through the strength of its ideals. Earth had been tested, its resolve had been broken, but it had risen again, stronger than ever. The galaxy would never forget the day humanity stood up to the Valkyrie, but more importantly, they would never forget the message that came with it: humanity's peace is not its weakness. It is its greatest strength. And now, as the Guardians returned to Earth, they knew that their fight was far from over. They had proven their strength, but their true mission was to ensure that humanity would never again be forced to choose between its ideals and its survival. The battle for the soul of Earth had just begun. But in the hearts of the Guardians, one thing was certain: they would always stand for what was right, and they would always fight to protect what mattered most. The galaxy would now know that Earth's strength was not defined by its weapons, but by its heart. And that, above all, was what made humanity unbreakable. The story of Cain and the Guardians unfolds not only as a gripping tale of military conquest and betrayal, but also as a profound exploration of humanity's core ideals and the price of standing up for what is right. It teaches us invaluable lessons about loyalty, resilience, and the dangers of complacency in the face of power. This tale reminds us that true strength does not lie in domination or sheer force, but in the courage to uphold our values, even when confronted with the darkest of betrayals. The central theme of this narrative revolves around the clash between ideals, the vision of a humanity grounded in compassion and justice, versus the harsh reality of political ambition and the desire for control. Cain and his team, the Guardians, represent the very best of what humanity has to offer: individuals who dedicate their lives to defending the vulnerable, to maintaining peace, and to ensuring that goodness prevails, no matter the odds. The Council, on the other hand, represents a sobering warning about what can happen when power corrupts, when decisions are made for self-preservation rather than the greater good. The betrayal by the Council serves as a stark reminder that those entrusted with leadership are not infallible, and that sometimes, even the noblest ideals can be compromised in the pursuit of survival. One of the most important lessons drawn from this story is that loyalty is a precious and fragile thing. Cain and the Guardians had given everything for Earth, yet they were discarded when they were no longer seen as useful. The Council's betrayal highlights how easily trust can be broken, and how the very people who fight for a cause can be cast aside when that cause becomes inconvenient. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, the Guardians did not give in to despair. Instead, they chose to rise above their own hurt and betrayal, choosing to fight not just for revenge but for a greater cause: the ideals of humanity itself. This brings us to a critical point: resilience in the face of adversity. The Guardians were not just fighting the Valkyrie, they were fighting for their own sense of justice, for the very ideals that Earth had long championed. When the world turned against them, when their leaders betrayed them, they could have easily walked away, could have let the darkness overtake them. But they didn't. They fought back, not out of hatred or vengeance, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. They believed in the power of compassion, in the strength of standing for what is right, even when the world around them seems determined to tear those values apart. The narrative also explores the importance of making difficult choices. Cain's decision to continue with the mission despite the betrayal was not an easy one. It was a choice that required him to confront his own doubts and fears, to risk everything for the possibility of a better future. In life, we are often faced with moments where the easier choice may not always be the right one. Sometimes, the right path is fraught with challenges, filled with uncertainty and danger. But it is in these moments of struggle that we have the opportunity to define who we truly are. Cain's journey reminds us that we must never lose sight of our values, even when the world around us seems to crumble. At its core, this story is a powerful exploration of the importance of standing up for what is right, even when the cost is high. The Guardians stand against the Valkyrie, and their refusal to back down in the face of betrayal, demonstrates the immense power of conviction. Their actions serve as a testament to the idea that our ideals are worth defending, and that the fight for what is right, though difficult, is always worth it in the end. The Guardians' victory is not just about military conquest, it is about reclaiming what was lost, the soul of humanity. Perhaps the most inspiring message the story imparts is that true power is not found in might or conquest, but in the ability to protect and uplift others. The Guardians proved that humanity's greatest strength lies not in its weapons, but in its willingness to sacrifice for others, to extend compassion even to those who may not understand or appreciate it. In a world where power often prevails over principles, Cain and his team were the reminder that there is strength in choosing mercy over domination, in choosing peace over conflict. This story calls on each of us to reflect on our own actions and values. How far are we willing to go to defend the things that matter most to us? Are we prepared to stand firm when the world tries to pull us in a different direction? Will we choose to uphold our beliefs, even when it means facing adversity? The Guardians' fight was not just theirs, it was for all of us, showing us that, in the end, the ideals we hold dear are worth the fight. In a galaxy that often seems defined by chaos and conquest, humanity's greatest weapon is its capacity for compassion, for standing together and fighting for justice, even when it feels like the fight is lost. Cain and the Guardians remind us that as long as we hold on to our ideals, as long as we are willing to fight for what is right, there will always be hope. True strength is not measured by the power we wield, but by the power of our convictions. And this, more than anything, is the true victory of the Guardians. So, let this story serve as a beacon of hope for anyone who feels betrayed or lost. Let it remind you that even in the darkest moments, when everything seems to be falling apart, there is always a path forward, always a way to rise again. Your values, your compassion, and your commitment to justice are more powerful than anything that seeks to tear them down. You, like the Guardians, have the strength to make a difference, not just in your own life, but in the world around you. Keep fighting, keep believing, and know that the greatest victories are those won with the heart, not the sword.